All right, Asipa, when you're ready, we can, I think we are about live. I've started the recording already, so we are safe to go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. Welcome to the fourth Mandela Bay Development Agency Conversations. My name is Oasi Pemkhalisa, and I will be facilitating/hosting today's engagement. The theme for today's discussion is cybercrimes, navigating the dangers of the digital space. So thank you so much for joining us today. And also thank you to the MBDA team under the CEO, Mr. Ashraf Adams, who is joining us today. So welcome to you too. This conversation comes at a time where the global pandemic has shifted workspaces, with working from home being the safer and convenient choice for many South Africans and many organizations in order for them to keep on operating efficiently and effectively. South Africa, which is a country that is at the top of the countries with the most cybercrime victims, needs this conversation that is happening here today. The recent rise to cybercrimes has been concerning, as South Africa hosts a lot of major company headquarters, particularly those in banking and also those in retail, in comparison to the rest of Africa. So naturally, this makes the region more attractive to hackers. So South Africa is not also lagging behind in terms of technology like it once did. So well, some would say that the global village we live in has its pros and cons. But we'll hear more from the speakers today. Just before moving to today's contributions, I'd like to ask all attendees to kindly ensure that their mics and videos are off at all times so that we can allow the speakers to speak and also run the program smoothly. Colleagues and friends, kindly note that you can also share your comments, questions, or contributions on the chat section, and all those will be dealt with after the speakers have shared their contributions. There's a slot in the program where we will be entertaining questions and answers. Alternatively, during that time, you may raise your hand so that we can allow you to speak. So thank you so much once again for joining us today. And those joining us in different platforms here on Teams, joining us on the MBDA Facebook page, and also those joining us on the YouTube page. I hope that we'll have a fruitful and powerful engagement. Let us learn, unlearn, and relearn. Well, we are joined today by two leading experts in the field who will deliberate on today's topic. Our first speaker to offer his contribution, opening remarks and opening statements is Dr. Kevin Kativu, who is a lecturer at Nelson Mandela University. He obtained his PhD in Health Information Systems at Nelson Mandela University in 2017. He is involved in the development of community-oriented ICT solutions through participation in the Center for Community Technologies. His areas of expertise are in development, information security, and networking. Well, without wasting any time, help me welcome Dr. Kativu. Over to you, Doc, and welcome.
Good morning, Sipe. Thank you for that welcome. Just to verify that everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes, you are.
Great, thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. My esteemed panel guests as well, and all the people who are attending. Thank you to the MBDA for, of course, hosting this seminar and allowing us to have this conversation, especially at a time when cybercrimes are essentially being one of the biggest conversations we're having across the whole ICT sector. As already introduced, my name is Kevin Kativu, and I will be just taking you through a brief presentation talking and looking at the background of cyber crimes in the digital spaces. We're also going to explore some of the different digital spaces and sort of distinguish between what we know as traditional digital spaces and what the general world outside, including the malicious actors and the businesses, consider to be digital spaces. Without taking too much of the time, let me flag my presentation and we'll take it from there. Sipe, please confirm if you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can, Doctor.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Okay, I've titled this presentation Cybercrime in Digital Spaces, with a focus particularly on digital spaces. I think it's important for us to have a good understanding of what we mean when we talk about digital spaces and how these digital spaces vary depending on your particular activities on the internet. So let us start by exploring what a digital space is. You sometimes hear people talk about the digital playground, and you also hear people talk about the digital workspace, but you also have what we call the digital battleground. So essentially, our digital playground is where we find most of our social media platforms, our social media tools, our entertainment sort of platforms. And essentially, in these spaces, people interact and share content that is not really sensitive, but generally, it's an interaction platform. This space is supposed to be a safe space where people can communicate and share information without having any worries about what is happening beyond that. You also have the digital workspace, and in the digital workspace, this is where we find the collaboration tools, where we have people interacting, sharing organizational information, having digital meetings, the same way we're having this webinar currently. And of course, we have the digital battleground. And in the digital battleground, you also have people who are using the digital space for malicious activities such as espionage, or cyber crimes like hacking or theft of personal information, and other such activities. The biggest problem we have is that all these digital spaces exist in one collective digital space, which means they are not separate from each other. It's essentially based on what you are doing at that particular time in that space, but you must also remember that you're interacting in the same space as those who have different intentions and different uses for those particular platforms. So this is where we'll delve into cybercrimes and look at how cybercrimes have had an impact on the South African landscape. It's important to note that in 2020, the South African government passed the Cybercrimes Act, to be corrected. Now, this Cybercrimes Act is very important because it actually shows that there's significant impact coming from these cybercrimes. We have a few examples of what these are. We have unlawful access, unlawful interception of data, unlawful acts in respect to software or hardware tools. I will not read through all of these, but I think we will be able to share this presentation for those who might want to follow up. I have put the source, and this is obtained from the gov.za website, so you can actually go through and see all the different subcategories of cybercrime that have been listed. Now remember, this is not exhaustive. This is essentially a general identification of what is considered to be cybercrime. We've also recently learned or experienced more incidences involving malicious communications. So this is messages which incite damage or property to violence, damage to property or violence, as we may have seen with the KZN riots that happened recently. Data messages that threaten persons with damage to property or violence, I've mentioned that already. Disclosure of data messages of intimate images, attempting, conspiring, aiding, abetting, inducing, inciting, instigating, instructing, commanding, or procuring to commit offense. So these are all considered malicious activities and are categorized under the cybercrimes frame. How does this apply in the South African context? Let's have a look. Let's start by looking at Africa in general. Africa has an estimated 500 million internet users, and this equates to 38% of the African population. Now, if we go back to the discussion around the digital playground, the digital workspace, and the digital battleground, we must understand that this percentage of the population is playing or is participating in different sectors or different playgrounds or different digital workspaces on the internet. Of that 38%, South Africa accounts for approximately 38.13 million of those users. And it's important to note that that's the figure we're working with when we're looking at the cybercrimes within the context. So Interpol published a report on the top cybercrimes in Africa. And I want us to see if we can identify a thread here. We have online scams, we have digital extortion, we have phishing attacks, ransomware, and botnets. And now, as I mentioned already, these have been identified on the Interpol website, and it's important to mention that these are across the whole African context, not specifically only to South Africa, but of course, the same would apply within the South African context as well. What we're seeing here is a heavy involvement of the human element. When we speak of online scams and digital extortion and phishing, these all fall under the category of social engineering. And you can see that there's a heavy influence of the human or the individual or group of individuals within these categories of cyber threats. We all know about the ransomware attacks that recently affected some of the ports within the South African context as well. And botnets are essentially a collection of computing devices over the internet that can be controlled from a central point and used for malicious activity. For example, what we commonly know as the distributed denial of service attack. Now I'm going to go and look at some of the examples of how these threats have actually had an impact in the South African context. So let's look at what has been coming up in the news of late. This information is obtained from the website cybercrime.org.za, and there's actually quite a lot more than what I have listed there. So we can see these articles. Ransomware attacks cost in excess of 1 million for 1 in 4 South African victims. Cyber criminals are increasingly targeting South Africa, and these are all articles that are published in 2021. The FBI arrests notorious internet scammers in Cape Town, and the scammer behind 100 million university hack flees the country. And small and vulnerable, this is specific to the SMEs and SMEs on a ransomware collision course. Now, these are all popping up of late and are indicating that there's a strong trend towards cyber extortion, ransomware, and other sort of cyber malicious activities within the South African context, particularly targeting businesses and individuals. Let's look at the thread. How is this data being obtained? As I mentioned before, the thread we're identifying there is the involvement of the human element. Much of this data is volunteered, which means the information that people publicly post on social media, they publicly post on other social sites, or even educational or informational websites. Some of this information can even be obtained from an average CV, right? So that's important to note. You also have your credit card scams, right? Your social engineering, as we've already mentioned, and which is the eavesdropping, and your digital profile scrubbing. This is all information that is being obtained online, and normally this information is gathered from individuals, and in many cases, this information is volunteered. When I use the term volunteered, I don't mean knowingly given. I mean this information is given under the pretext of a trust relationship or familiarity with the individual or the malicious actor who is requesting this information. Right, so let's look at some of the attack vectors. We've got online collaboration tools. We can use this one as a good example. Do you know all your attendees, right? In many cases, you'll find, especially when you have a large platform and you have a large set of guests who are attending that particular event, you may not be able to track and trace each and every individual who is attending or participating, because in many cases, anyone who has access to the link can attend, which means if you're having perhaps a sensitive discussion, this information can also be leaked purely because you have attendees who should not be participating in that particular meeting. So it's important to look at online collaboration tools and also understand how these should be configured or set up in such a way that you have some level of control over those who are participating and the information that is being disseminated from those particular tools. Your online shopping, there was an article on the previous slide actually mentioning how South Africa has lost in excess of 100 million rands on a fraudulent online shopping website. And this, once again, can also be attributed to the fact that users may not be able to do enough research or may not have the tools or means to do enough research to identify whether these websites or these platforms are legitimate. For example, the website in question here had only been active for a year, which if most people had that knowledge might have actually thought twice before actually transacting on that particular platform. Then you've got your online payments, right? And can you verify the information that is provided? Can you verify that the details you're making payment to are the actual details or the intended details? Once again, this is something that can easily be verified by the individuals before these payments are made. And for example, some will always request that you don't make any payment unless you actually have a physical copy of the transaction details, right? And not to necessarily trust anything that is transmitted over email. If it is to be transmitted over email, perhaps using tools like encryption, for example, may aid in protecting that information and ensuring the integrity of the information that is received on the other end. So that is the common thread we're looking at. How do we then address the issues that are facing businesses and organizations, knowing the information we know, and knowing that individuals and the human element is part of the reason why these cyber threats may be succeeding to such an extent within the context. Right, and I think, of course, we will have this discussion as well within the panel, but the consideration of an all-inclusive approach, right, is oftentimes one of the best ways to mitigate against such activities. Cybercriminals often exploit familiarity and trust. That is very important. And familiarity and trust are things that typically come naturally to many human beings. Anyone who seems to be in some form of authority generally receives a level of default trust. And as a result, this can be a way of collecting or maliciously collecting information from those individuals or those groups of individuals. But you'll find that in a lot of cases, just providing some level of awareness can actually mitigate against these challenges. When we speak of awareness, we're not speaking of awareness as in having a cybersecurity team or having an IT department that is trained or that is familiar with all the threats and the cybersecurity landscape, who are actually dealing with the threats and the challenges within the organization. We're speaking about accommodating everyone within the organization. Everyone who has any active role within the organization should be made aware of the dangers and challenges that are facing organizations because of these cyber crimes. As they say, you are only as strong as your weakest link. So it is important to make sure that this information is disseminated across an entire organization, across, for example, when we take it outside the context of an organization, even in the home, for example, that this information is disseminated across the whole home structure from elder parents, family members, etc., to make sure that people do not fall victim to these exploits. You must remember that the same people who you encounter at home are the same people who are going to go to these different organizations and also face the same challenges. So ensuring that this information is disseminated across the board is one of the ways we can look at mitigating such challenges. I will pause there for now and allow my fellow panelists to also have a contribution to the conversation, but I thought I'll just bring in a bit of a background and have a look at the current status of the cybersecurity landscape within the context. Thank you for listening and thank you for the time. Back to you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doc, for sharing with us your knowledge on digital spaces. I was enjoying listening to you there and learning a lot as well. I mean, you've said a lot in terms of the different kinds of digital spaces where people and organizations interact. So thank you so much for sharing with us the interconnectedness and complexities of these spaces. This is also an awareness for many, not only for businesses, but also for individuals to understand the vulnerable platforms to be aware of in terms of how much the internet stores and consumes, particularly when it comes to online shopping spaces, which is my favorite. So thank you so much for that awareness. Well, colleagues and friends, thanks, Doug. Colleagues and friends, our next speaker is Mr. Steve Jump, who holds a Biz Science Honors, Chartered Engineer, FIET, CISM, CDPSE, SCF. So he holds a lot of accolades. So Mr. Jump has an unshamedly technical background, being both a chartered engineer and an entrepreneur. His career was built on exponentially developing technologies and managing their risks. His experience in entrepreneurial, parastatal, and corporate business environments allows him today to advise, to coach, and consult around the cyber risks that businesses and society face today. Mr. Jump presently coaches and advises in the field of information security risk and governance, where his technology and business experience help build sustainable and resilient systems and teams. Well, colleagues and friends, help me welcome Mr. Jump. Over to you, Mr. Jump.
Thank you very much for that amazing welcome. I hope I can live up to that accolade. So I've had a career built on electronics and software and the internet. In many cases, I have been one of those pioneers who tried to make it work before I even knew how to make it work. And through my career, that has been building systems, building businesses, working for large businesses where I've helped that with customers and inside businesses, and also more recently working with lots and lots of small business, trying to explain why cyber risk is something that you can't leave to the people in IT. So I'm following on from Dr. Kativu's line. He actually stole some of my thunder, which was absolutely brilliant because it means I'm in the right place. So I'm going to pick on that meme, digital spaces. So the reality we have today, quite simple. Everything we do is based on data. And seriously, think about it. What do you do in your daytime? You might switch your TV set on in the morning and you're getting broadcast TV. If you're lucky enough to have an internet connection, you are possibly streaming data and media from all over the world. The reality is everything that we do is linked to a data token. So information, value, money, entertainment, and wealth are all data in somebody's database. The numbers in your bank account. You're all familiar with the numbers in your bank account. The numbers in your bank account represent money. So the digital information about you also represents who you are and what you do. Now, we link that through. There's technology behind all of this. But this information we need to live, we need to survive, we need to basically be who we are. So today, everybody, I'm pretty sure it's everybody on this meeting, every family member of every person and every family member, person or friend of those as we follow it through, has a mobile phone. The majority of mobile phones today are basically pocket computers, and they are how we engage with this digital world. Additionally, many people, particularly if you're running a business, you will have a laptop. You may have a desktop, but usually that's in an office. You will very likely, more likely at home, you'll have a tablet. And of course, you'll have the smartphones of a degree of sizes which can go from tiny to large enough to play full games on. This is your contact with the digital world. How does it affect us? Because the digital world is behind these wonderful devices. Well, we talk to our friends, we talk to our families, we socialize using these channels. We also research, we look, we compare, we decide, and we buy, and we shop. We spend a lot of time shopping. But we also talk to our customers, we talk to our suppliers and our partners. We do business online through these devices. It becomes a central part of our existence. So no matter how small we think we are as an individual, or even how large our businesses are, we could be a one-woman entrepreneur, or we could be part of a corporation with 10,000 employees. Everything we do has a digital layer. At one end of that digital layer is us. We work, we live, we socialize, we entertain ourselves on that channel. Our business interests will try and keep us safe, but I'm focusing more about the edge of that, and I'm talking about us as individuals and how we can keep ourselves safe in this digital world. Now, wonderful statistics that Dr. Katibu put up, and because I work in risk, I'm one of those weird people. I deal with statistics, and sometimes statistics have to be taken in context. So when you look at the figures of cyber crimes and cyber incidents that are reported in South Africa, yes, we are very, very high. But when you actually look at these statistics, it's not all bad news. The stuff that makes the headlines, yes, is bad news. But why do we have such a high level of information? It's because we actually have one of the highest ratios of deployed antivirus and anti-malware and protection software in our IT systems. And it is the data from all of these that allows people to say, we have detected more cyber attacks. Yes, we have, because we're looking in more places than many other countries. So the bad news is people are trying to attack us because we have money. And the good news is we can see them trying to attack us. So it's not like we're doing this blind. So it's not something we should be terrified of, but it is something we should be taking seriously. So bringing that back to us as people, in our communities, as citizens, as family members, as friends. So literally, when we consider it, our parents, our children, our partners, practically everything we value exists digitally, and we share information with them, and they're using the same devices that we do. Now, bringing this back, and that cybercrime hooks are serious, but we look at cybercrime because, when we're talking about cybercrime, and digital crime is something that's new to a lot of people. But the reality is, ever since time began, whenever you had created anything of value, there was always someone who didn't want to put in the effort of recreating what you had done. They just wanted to steal it from you and profit from your efforts without doing any work. That's been built into society since the very beginning. There's always someone who wanted to steal. And theft today is still a crime. But what is being stolen today is your data. It's the data that represents the value of yourself and your family. Quite often that data is actually your identity, where you have given in some media or some unsolicited communication information about yourself, which allows somebody to act on your behalf. To keep it simple, we call this cybercrime. And it is plain and simple theft. Someone is trying to get your money, either directly to steal it from you, to con you or defraud you into sending your money to someone who doesn't deserve it, or to damage something that you use to live with, your family photo album online, for example, or if you're a business, to extort using ransomware and threats to basically steal value without working from it. So although we see this in our greatly amplified social media environment, which quite often exaggerates certain factors for click-throughs and business benefit. Something to be aware of is not everything that we read on the internet is true. And we also need to realize that not everything that is written on the internet that is untrue is fiction. It's designed to influence us in negative ways sometimes, or different ways than we would normally do. We went through, I'm not going to repeat the cybercrimes on that, but sometimes telling lies for personal benefit, even telling lies for political benefit, telling lies as a form of hate crime is a recognized cybercrime. But they hurt us personally and they hurt us as a society. But I'm focusing now mainly on how we keep our assets straight. You have your phone. It contains your information. It pretty much represents you. I'm hoping that you all lock your phones. The same way you should always have a password on your tablet, on your laptop, on your phone. I will give you a nice simple example. One of the most expensive items you carry with you is your phone, in terms of what you paid for it, or what you're probably still paying for it if it's on a contract. But the reality is that the information on that phone represents your life, not just your phone. Losing your phone is unfortunate and is a painful experience. But if you lose the access to all of the information that allows you to do business, your contacts, your phone list, your family, friends, your social media access, and someone else is able to take that from you, that is a way more painful and much more financially expensive experience than just having to replace a phone. And the way you make certain that if your phone is lost or stolen is you will lock it every time. It will automatically lock. Sometimes it's seen as an inconvenience, but believe me, if someone has your phone and it's unlocked and they have access to your passwords to your social media or access to your bank, this is a very, very painful and very avoidable situation. So think about how you protect your information. If it has a password, create a password. If you struggle with complicated passwords, there's a thing called passphrases. And there's a very useful resource that I use, cybercrime.org.za, which, if you have any concerns, it's a place to report cybercrimes. It is also a place to look about what scams are happening and ways to protect yourself. So I'm not going to bore you with all that detail. And it is a great resource because it has links to lots and lots of other places if you're interested. It will tell you how to keep yourself safe, but more importantly, it will tell you what to look out for, how to keep your children safe, how to keep your parents and grandparents safe, how to keep your colleagues safe. And if you're not already getting this information in terms of cybercrime awareness through your work environment, it will actually give you information to take into work and help keep your colleagues safe as well. So let's round this off. We talk about online scams. This week is a really great week for online scams. An American commercial festival has become a global one. Black Friday week, the day after the American Thanksgiving holiday, and was originally designed to get people buying after they had not been buying through the autumn. We have it here. There are discounts and special offers, and people are rushing to buy online. People are rushing to go to stores and queue for sometimes strange and dubious discounts. But the reality is people are ready to spend their money online. Make sure you are dealing with somebody that you recognize. If you've never heard of this company before, it's not going to be wise to buy something from them for 10,000 Rand. And if you're going to spend that amount of money, you need to make sure you're paying it to the right people. One of the biggest scams, and sadly, this happens to be a scam that was perfected in South Africa, although it's now a global problem, is the so-called instant EFT. If you don't have a credit card, instant EFT gives the seller access to your bank account. Be very careful giving access to your bank account. I would personally not recommend it because, one, your bank will not protect you from it, and two, if you make a mistake, the money's gone and cannot be recovered. These are the kind of scams that we face. Obviously, people selling us things that don't exist has been around for a very, very long time. This is just digital. Now, the other way we get scammed is we go through social media and we receive messages from people we don't know. Something to be aware of, a Facebook friend is really statistically unlikely to be your friend. You will know some friends and family. But if you just go through Facebook and find out how many of the people on my friends list do I know, and you can actually get more than 20%. If you have 100 friends and you actually know 20 of them, you're in the minority because most people know less than 5% of the people they actually talk to on Facebook. And some of the people they talk to do not have your personal best interests at heart. They either want to change your opinion, or more likely, they want to find a way of getting access to your money. Just the same as when you're walking down the street, when you're sat on a bus or a taxi, everybody around you is friendly, but you wouldn't ask them to hold your wallet while you went to the bathroom, not unless you knew them. It's the same when you're on social media. Be careful. It's entertaining. It definitely is intellectually challenging and stimulating, but a lot of these conversations, especially the ones that recommend that you go through to a website, many of the times those recommendations are paid for, even if it's not a reputable site. And there's a general rule, if it sounds too good to be true, it almost always is too good to be true. Most of these scams feed on the old human beings have a greedy streak. If we can get something for a discount or get something for free, we tend to turn off our reasoning. Well, this time of year, you can't afford to be that susceptible. So focus on what you're doing. The other way that scammers take advantage of us is getting access to our personal information. Something mentioned a little while ago, phishing. I want you to log into a website. Actually, if I'm a cyber criminal, by the way, I'm not, but I know a lot of people who do that kind of thing for a living, and I know how to catch them. But if I wanted to get access to your bank account, I would send you an email saying it's from your bank, asking you to log in with your banking credentials. And as you log in through my email, I will take your banking credentials and then I can log into your bank account quicker than you can. That's how phishing works. I'm picking the bank because probably that's where most of your free cash lies around. But any site where you have pre-programmed your credit or debit card, any site that sells you things, if I send an email to you today that log on to the macro site and you're a macro customer, you might just click on log into the macro site for your Black Friday specials. Make sure you're really logging onto the macro site. Because if you're already set up for online trading, they may take your credentials, log on, and they'll do purchasing on your behalf. And before you know it, all your money's been spent and the goods have been delivered to some locker somewhere and picked up by an anonymous person. So what is convenient for honest people is convenient for criminals, and we just have to make sure we don't play into that. And here's a hint. When you receive an SMS or a WhatsApp message saying you have just won a lottery because your phone number was selected as a prize at random, sad news for you. And just a hint, you will never have been drawn out of a lottery randomly if you didn't enter that lottery. It's not the way business works. So the fact that you've won a prize and you may have to pay money to get access to that prize, or you can join the dots, it's actually a scam. So when we talk about sharing passwords, you need passwords, but you shouldn't be sharing your password with anybody. And the same goes for your PIN for your bank cards. There is nobody who needs access to your PIN unless you are giving them the money. Because the reality is anybody with your PIN has your money. So if you would hand banknotes to that person, by all means, give them your PIN, because giving your PIN and a card is exactly the same as handing over banknotes. Not something you would ever do to a stranger, not something a bank will ever ask you for. And even if the bank has information about you, when they're phoning you, it is very possibly that information may have been on your social media site. So you just have to be aware, not distrust everybody, but be distrustful. If it doesn't look right, if it sounds too good to be true, if you're getting critical requests from people that you know who've never asked you for money before, check and see if it is them. A sudden message on Facebook that says, help, I'm stranded, I'm in quarantine at an airport, I need money, please can you send me 10,000 Rand to help me pay for food and pay for my quarantine hotel? It may be somebody you know or a name that you know. Call them back and check, because this is one of the favorite ways of getting money from you. You give it away under false pretenses. By the way, this type of crime goes back nearly 500 years, when people were traveling the world and a message would come back on a scrap of paper saying, I've been kidnapped by pirates, please send a ransom. So none of these crimes are new, they've just been digitized. So if you do think you've been scammed, if it's bank, call your bank immediately. If you're not quite sure who to call, there is a great website, cybercrime.org.za, which has lots of help. It gives you ideas of what you can and what you can't do. It's a lot of information locally sourced and internationally sourced. If you want to know how to keep your children safe, if you're worried about cyberbullying, if you're worried about people taking your information or scamming you through your bank, scamming your family, people that might want to try and defraud your grandmother, particularly if she gets her pension paid electronically every month. All of these things you as an individual need to look at, but you also need to be looking at for your family and your friends as well. Be careful when you start sharing information of scams that you recognize it, because there's an awful lot of fake news about scams as well. And some of this fake news is designed to get you so used to the news about scams that you start to ignore them. So just like walking down the street, you will be careful when strangers approach you. On the internet, you need to be just as aware of that. There are a lot of good people out there. I'd say definitely there are many more good people than bad people, but you have to make sure. And part of that is basically use your understanding. Don't believe everything that people tell you. Learn how to look, how to check, and how to think safe. So that really is my story for you now. Basically, be careful out there. There's a lot of fun stuff on the internet, but there are a lot of dangerous places if you are not careful. Thank you.